The video explores the complex migration patterns of millions of Muslims fleeing conflict, authoritarianism, and economic collapse in the Muslim world, focusing on why they overwhelmingly seek refuge in Europe rather than in nearby wealthy Muslim countries. While the Gulf monarchies are affluent and geographically close, they do not offer asylum or integration, preferring a strict division between citizens and transient foreign workers, with no path to citizenship or political rights. In contrast, Europe, despite historical colonial tensions, extended humanitarian aid and embraced multiculturalism, allowing refugees access to healthcare, education, and legal rights, and encouraging cultural coexistence. However, this European model, initially optimistic about integration through rights and tolerance, has encountered profound challenges. Many Muslim immigrants retain traditional social norms, rigid family hierarchies, collectivist values, and gender roles that clash with Europe's liberal, individualistic culture. This cultural dissonance has led to segregated communities where informal authority often supersedes state law, and practices such as pressure to wear hijabs or restrictions on women's freedoms persist. European authorities, wary of accusations of racism or Islamophobia, have often adopted a policy of passive tolerance, allowing parallel social structures that undermine democratic values. The video highlights the failures of different European integration models: France's strict assimilationist approach, Germany's labor-based model without integration efforts, and Sweden's extreme multiculturalism, each resulting in social fragmentation, radicalization, and rising violence. Political elites struggle to address these issues effectively, leading to growing support for anti-immigration parties and policies focused on cultural preservation and border control. The European Union is deeply divided over migration, with some countries rejecting refugee quotas to protect national identity. The video concludes by underscoring the political risk Muslim refugees represent to Gulf monarchies, who fear the spread of dissenting ideas and political Islam that could threaten their fragile regimes. Europe's openness contrasts sharply with the Gulf's closed-door policies, but Europe's lack of clear integration demands risks its own social cohesion. The ongoing tension reflects a broader identity crisis in Europe and the Muslim world, posing fundamental questions about coexistence, democracy, and cultural adaptation in the 21st century. Highlights millions of Muslims flee war, dictatorship, and poverty but seek refuge mainly in Europe, not nearby rich Muslim countries. Post-war Europe embraced multiculturalism, granting immigrants rights and encouraging cultural coexistence as a new civilizational model. Muslim immigrants often maintain traditional social norms that clash with Europe's liberal individualism, complicating integration. Many European authorities adopt passive tolerance, allowing parallel community structures that challenge democratic norms. Different European integration models, assimilation, labor-based, extreme multiculturalism, have all struggled, leading to social fragmentation and violence. Rising anti-immigration political movements reflect growing public frustration and elite uncertainty about multiculturalism's future. Wealthy Gulf monarchies refuse refugees due to political fears,
strict citizenship policies, and preservation of fragile autocratic social orders.
Strict citizenship policies and preservation of fragile autocratic social orders. Migration patterns reveal geopolitical and cultural fault lines. The fact that refugees prefer Europe over neighboring Muslim countries highlights a profound fracture in the Muslim world as socio-political landscape.
Wealth in Gulf monarchies does not translate into humanitarian openness or political inclusivity.
Wealth in Gulf monarchies does not translate into humanitarian openness or political inclusivity. This exposes the gulf between economic power and social responsibility in these regimes, reflecting their primary aim to maintain tribal and autocratic control rather than foster multicultural citizenship. Europe's multiculturalism was a bold experiment with mixed results. Europe's post-war embrace of multiculturalism was revolutionary, aiming to transform societies fractured by fascism and racism into inclusive democracies. The policy recognized the equal value of all cultures and sought to replace assimilation with cultural pluralism. However, it underestimated the complexity of integration, particularly when immigrant cultures include social norms and power structures that fundamentally conflict with liberal democratic values. Cultural norms persist across borders, creating parallel societies. Muslim immigrants bring more than religion. They bring deeply embedded social hierarchies, collectivism, and gender roles that resist change. These cultural elements often manifest as parallel systems of authority within European cities, where local laws are secondary to community-imposed rules. This undermines the principle of equal citizenship and the rule of law, complicating efforts to create cohesive multicultural societies. Passive tolerance risks undermining democratic principles. European authorities' fear of being labeled racist or Islamophobic has led to a policy of passive tolerance that sometimes allows harmful practices such as forced marriages or community surveillance to persist unchecked. This approach inadvertently legitimizes parallel power structures that challenge democratic norms and erode the uniform application of law, risking social fragmentation and weakening public trust in institutions. The failure of integration models exposes a lack of clear strategy. The contrasting approaches in France, Germany, and Sweden illustrate the difficulty of balancing cultural diversity with social cohesion. France's forced assimilation alienates minorities. Germany's labor-focused immigration neglects societal integration. And Sweden's extreme multiculturalism fosters segregation. All have led to radicalization and increased social tensions, underscoring the need for nuanced policies that demand integration without erasing identity. Political backlash reflects societal anxiety and elite paralysis. The rise of anti-immigration parties across Europe is symptomatic of broader societal anxiety over cultural change and perceived loss of identity. Political elites' hesitance to confront integration challenges head-on fuels polarization and empowers populist movements that promise control and preservation of national identity. This trend threatens democratic norms by pushing exclusionary policies and deepening divisions. Gulf monarchies' refugee policies reflect authoritarian survival strategies. The refusal of wealthy Gulf states to accept refugees is not merely a matter of resources but a calculated political decision to preserve fragile autocratic regimes. Refugees bring ideas and networks that could destabilize the delicate tribal and patronage systems underpinning these monarchies. The stark contrast between Gulf exclusion and European inclusion highlights the political risks and trade-offs faced by authoritarian regimes versus liberal democracies in managing migration. Conclusion. The video presents a nuanced examination of Muslim migration to Europe, highlighting both the humanitarian generosity and the cultural political challenges it entails. Europe's historic experiment with multiculturalism faces a crisis as immigrant communities maintain social norms incompatible with liberal democratic values, and European societies struggle to demand integration without alienating minorities. Meanwhile, wealthy Muslim countries close their borders, prioritizing regime stability over shared cultural or religious bonds. This dynamic not only exposes deep fractures within the Muslim world but also forces Europe to confront profound questions about identity, democracy, and coexistence in a rapidly changing global landscape. The future of both regions depends on how these challenges are addressed, revealing that migration is as much a test of political will and cultural flexibility as it is a matter of humanitarian concern.